Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Initiation into Mystery, our 15-part series on the mysteries of the Rosary. Tonight we are on mystery number 11, the resurrection. We made it through the sorrowful mysteries. Phew. um, so we've been talking about a kind of methodology the whole time, which is to know what's actually just happening in the story, to know what's happening in kind of the meta narrative of the story, um, and then to bring our own imaginations to bear on the mystery,
Yeah,
to let it become
yeah,
a story that invites us to tell our story. So we start with the resurrection, and what's interesting is what we think we know about the resurrection and what's really going on there.
yeah. Well, most people think, Jesus is risen. That's the expression, right? The emphasis is on Jesus rising, and the context of it. We have a few mythic sort of markers, like the stone rolled away, the angels, and so forth and so on. I mean, for a long, long time, centuries and centuries, they overlooked the fact that in all of the Gospels, it is Mary Magdalene who is the first witness of the resurrection, and this is really the central fact of the resurrection that we need to take into account.
And let's just take a moment and with Mary Magdalene, shall we?
Yeah,
Because here we are with Mary Magdalene.
yeah,
And let's talk about Magdalene and what that word means. Magdalene, Magdala, was not a place during Jesus' day. It would
yeah.
be many, many centuries before Magdala would become a place with a watchtower.
Right.
It was not, and it didn't exist. And so, what most scholars believe is that Miriam of Bethany, which is just outside of Jerusalem, was Mary the Magdalene. And the Magdalene would have meant Mary the Tower, Mary the
Right.
Watchtower,
Right.
Mary the Column of Saints.
Right.
Um, and so this is a way of saying that this woman
Is an incarnation, is an avatar, an
of the
incarnation of the
goddess,
goddess. Yeah.
she holds within her all life.
Yeah.
She is the great tower, the tower that stands in contrast to the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. The Tower of Ivory, the Tower of David. So
And
these
even the
are,
alabaster
yeah.
jar that she carries in so many medieval pictures is often shown as a tower.
Right.
As and it is that tower of all life. It's the tower of our
Mm,
DNA, of our
yeah.
RNA.
Yeah.
It is the tower that is beneath our feet, the strata and layers of life
Right.
of the earth itself.
I think St. Barbara is the one who carries the tower, and those two figures are often sort of,
Yeah.
syncretically sort of like
Well, the alabaster
overlapped.
jar
And
often looks like the
yeah,
tower.
yeah,
And so here's the question. She anoints Jesus. And what is that? Oh, we got to really step into our Mediterranean mythology here.
yeah,
To anoint the king, the person who traditionally did that was Inanna, was the goddess.
right,
She chose her consort.
right.
And what she's doing is Isis, Inanna, all of these Ashura, these Middle Eastern goddesses, they tell the same story.
So it's the story of a slain god who is often either a brother or a lover,
Or
sometimes the
both.
son, sometimes yeah, sometimes both, and he dies a sacrificial death and then is resurrected by his lover, by the goddess. And in the oldest written traditions that we have from that part of the world where the Bible came into being, we have the same story about a goddess, Inanna resurrecting Dumuzi, right?
Absolutely.
Isis resurrecting Osiris.
And the traditional description of that consort is that he is the gardener.
Yeah,
He is the person who's going to bring the earth. He's the
right,
sunlight who's bringing the
right,
earth back into
right.
bloom and getting everything fertile
Yeah,
again. And he is the returning force of the sun.
yeah.
Um, Mary Magdalene mistakes Jesus for
The
the
gardener.
gardener. Are
She's
you the gardener? She
yeah.
says. That question is not a mistake.
No, it's code. It would this would have been code for people living during the time that the Gospels were first being composed orally, most likely, and then written down. And people would have, that was a kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod to the fact that the Magdalene had resurrected Jesus. She had spent 3 days there by the tomb performing rituals that were intended to resurrect him.
And this is what Isis does.
Yeah.
Isis's beloved is killed by Set. And she goes out and looks for him, puts his body together again, finds him and drowned and cut into pieces. He's been put into a box.
Right.
She finds the pieces. She resurrects him, but she resurrects him for one purpose. And this is an explicit purpose in the ancient Egyptian mythology. And that is to impregnate her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, Clark and I were lucky enough, very lucky, to get to go to an exhibit on the Osiris mysteries when we were in Paris. Our Lady coincidentally decided that there would be an Osiris exhibit right across from our apartment where we were staying in Paris. And so we spent a kind of ecstatic evening there,
wandering
immersed
through all of these old sarcophagi and statues and things. There was a kind of a vat. We write about this in the notes of Way of the Rose. There was this vat which had an effigy of Osiris in it with a phallus that would actually flower. They would, a figure called the widow, okay, served by a woman, would come and she would pour this mixture of seed and soil and water into this vat and then close it up. And it was part of the yearly spring fertility rites. And they would open it up, and of course, it would have all the seeds would all have germinated.
And we still talk about the flowering rod, the flowering staff that Joseph of Arimathea will bring to England. That flowering staff is the phallus.
Yeah.
And you see this with Kali and Shiva. There's somebody posted recently a marvelous picture. You know, Shiva lays himself at Kali's feet in order to save the world. But there's one part of Shiva that doesn't lie flat. Guess what?
That's quite true. A lot of the pictures are really very explicit about that.
They're very explicit. He submits to her authority, but he doesn't surrender his sexuality. And what's so interesting about the way the Christian myth has been manipulated, and this is the moment, of course, where Miriam is written out of the story, is that this is the goddess resurrecting her lover. This is the goddess so that going into union with her lover so that she can resurrect the land, resurrect the earth, bring spring, bring the earth back into bloom. And to take away sex from this story is to take away sex from the earth and to take away all of life. Right now we have fireflies in our yard, and I went out there last night, and what they're doing is a dance. They're looking for their fireflies.
For their beloveds.
They're looking for their beloved. To imagine that love and sex are not what renew the earth. Now there are a lot of different versions of that romance in nature.
Yeah.
I mean, there are beings who can be both sexes and try to be one sex one moment and one sex another. There are beings that have no sex. There are beings, but they all have a way of expressing this kind of passion and romance that exists, this hieroskamos that exists at the heart of the world. Every creature finds a way of expressing it. And this is what the resurrection is. It is the resurrection of sexuality, romance, love, possibility, and it happens in a garden.
And it doesn't just happen in the animal world either. It happens in the plant world. You know, if you want an image for the resurrection, all you have to imagine is the germination of a seed, right, under the soil. You can't necessarily see it, but I think, you know, that the symbolism of the stone being rolled away from the entrance to the tomb and Jesus coming out, it's not that different than a seed cracking open, right? The seed cracks open beneath the soil, and that green shoot begins its ascension.
It begins its, and it's the rising ascension, that green life force, the wick of life. You know, Wicca comes from the word wick. Wick is like that green shoot of life that exists within all beings. It's the life force.
Yeah. So all of the glorious mysteries, as we're going to see, basically follow kind of an ecological pattern. I mean, we can talk about Jesus ascending into the sky and Mary ascending into heaven and the descent of the Holy Spirit and all of that, but you can witness this happening just above the treetop, right? You can see these plants reaching up. You can see them seeding and dropping their seeds. You can see their seeds being assumed into the earth, right? Where they germinate and where the sort of union of sunlight and soil takes place to create new life.
Here's where the problem occurs. Two things happen. One is we write the goddess out of the story. Here she is. This is the moment. She's going to come back and tell Peter Jesus is risen, and Peter's going to say, "Great, you're out of the story. You're not part of it. You haven't been part of this
Yeah,
sacred romance."
yeah,
Okay, which makes everything go crazy. From there
yeah,
on in, it's a catastrophe, right?
yeah.
And then the second problem that occurs is to see resurrection as a singularity, as a one off. Certainly, the resurrection of the slain God was a story ubiquitous in the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
And it in itself wasn't standing in for singularity, it was talking about what all of nature does.
right.
This is in the wintertime, things die back. In the springtime, things are reborn.
That's right.
We know this with Easter. Astarte is based on Astarte, another one of these Mediterranean goddesses who
Mm-hmm.
resurrects her
Mm-hmm.
fallen lover.
Mm-hmm.
Astarte does this, and what that the eggs that are associated with her and Mary Magdalene, fertility.
Yeah,
The bunnies, fertility. We know that Easter is about sex, and yet we pretend that it's not.
yeah. So, that's it. It's a short video. The resurrection is, it is seen in modern Christianity as Perdita says, this singular event rather than a description of what is constantly happening in nature and a possibility that is open to us as well.
I'd like to talk about the fact that we go through the joyous mysteries. And here's
Mm,
another way to think of them very personally. We claim our right to joy. We say yes to joy. And that takes us on a journey. That yes takes us on a journey. And it's a journey that's not necessarily easy. Even the
mm,
joyous mysteries aren't easy.
mm,
We give birth to our joy in an unexpected place. Our joy runs away from us and we lose it and we have to refine it.
mm,
Then we go through a period of suffering and
mm,
difficulty.
mm.
And that period of suffering and difficulty, the sorrowful mysteries, is Clark described it really beautifully, I thought, last week, as the dark tunnel. We can't get to the light at the other end of the tunnel without going through the tunnel. And
Right,
neither can the seed. The seed is
right.
in the darkness.
And that light at the end of the tunnel is the birth canal. I mean, we experience that, when we talk about it at the cultural level, is kind of a modern myth of the light at the end of the
Right.
tunnel. What we're seeing is the light at the end of the birth canal that brings us right back into this world. And that birth canal can take a lot of different forms. It can be a human birth, it can be an animal birth, it can be a plant birth, right? It
And a
can be
seed,
that seed germinating and reaching up toward the light.
but when a seed germinates, one of the things, if you've, I'm sure people have done the lima bead thing when they were in elementary school and watched what happens,
Yeah.
the seed has to break open.
Yeah.
There is that brokenness. Our daughter once said, great moment of wisdom, when your heart breaks, is it? So,
No, as she said, inside of a broken heart is a bigger heart. Yeah,
and inside of a seed is a plant, but the seed has to break open.
right.
And then the seed has to rise.
Yeah.
And so the sorrowful mysteries are that breaking open, that
Hmm.
period of being broke. And I think we all have experienced this there is a hard won wisdom that comes from working with the sorrows of life.
Hmm.
If we
Yeah.
deny the sorrows of life, if we cut ourselves off from them,
Yeah.
we can't get to the glorious mysteries. We
Hmm.
can't get to the magic and the
Yeah.
miracles.
If you look around, even at an average house, made of wood, right? If you think of all the organic matter just in your house, right? Cloth made from cotton or from wool or the wood in your floors and the beams, right? Anything organic, everything you're looking at came from something very tiny, right? It grew from something very, very tiny. And it basically grew out of the earth, right? There's the egg and the sperm that join together, two very, very tiny things, to create the sheep who produces the wool. There's the seeds of the cotton. If you've ever picked cotton and sorted through it with your hands, you see
Clark's a
these
southerner.
tiny. I'm a southerner, so we do that for fun. We go out and find some cotton. They're tiny little flecks of seed that produce that, right? And they're acorns that produce oaks and so forth and so on.
But those moments of resurrection that we experience, those moments when joy comes to us, does Miriam know it's going to happen? She's clearly brokenhearted. My favorite Paida is when you see Jesus with Mary Magdalene by Botticelli. You know, it's just her. She's watched her beloved die. She's devastated, and yet she doesn't leave the tomb.
No.
She stays at the tomb.
Right.
She has faith in the earth. She has faith in the darkness inside of this devastating moment. And here I want to go really big because I think this is what it's really about. In Jesus's day, people still understood reincarnation and they believed in it.
Yeah.
Across the board.
I mean, throughout the Gospels, there are signs of it. They're constantly asking Jesus, is he Elijah? Who is he the reincarnation of, right?
Who is he the reincarnation of?
And when he's recognized as a reincarnation when he appears with Mary as an infant at the temple, right?
So I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm just going to drop a hint that what happens with Isis and Osiris is Osiris impregnates his wife and then he goes to the underworld.
Right.
And then she gives birth to a child.
Right.
And that becomes the resurrection. The
Right.
child is the resurrection. And
Right.
so sometimes people say baby Jesus and grown-up Jesus. Well, sometimes I wonder if maybe they're two people and not one person. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah.
But why write the idea of reincarnation out of the story? Because that's what's happening. It's being written out.
Yeah, and I think it's as simple as the fact that patriarchy is based on linear ideas, and it's also based on property. And property ownership makes sense if you if you live once.
If you live once.
Right.
If people are living many times.
Right.
And everyone's going and coming in a perpetual kind of country dance where we're circling around each other.
Then your culture is mostly spiritual culture in that case.
And there's no authority.
Right.
And, you know, there's an attempt to game the reincarnation system by making it, you know, first an animal, then a woman, then a man.
Right.
But in reality, male, female, suddenly all of these identities no longer make sense in a reincarnate world.
Right.
And they no longer have any power.
Right.
If we can be anything, then we can all be mothers. We all have been mothers. Everyone's been our child. Everyone's been our lover. Everyone will be. And so reincarnation, it's very interesting to me that Christianity crushes this idea of a reincarnate reality in this story, which is clearly what's being talked about. And when the Cathars, this is a Christian sect that emerges in 12th century France and throughout Europe, but primarily in the south of France. They believe in the perpetual resurrection of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, the beloved couple, the heros gamos, constantly coming back into the world. And they're obliterated by the church. I mean, a genocide that was so effective and so thorough that Hitler would actually study the techniques of the Catholic Church, including they made the Cathars put on yellow crosses. Yeah. They first identified them and then they obliterated them, and they would lock them in churches and then burn the churches to the ground.
And that idea was considered very, very dangerous, the idea of reincarnation.
And that was the danger. Yeah. Why get rid of them? Because what they were saying is that temporal, linear, hierarchical power was an illusion.
And patriarchy is based on fear. And if you live perpetually, and if you know that you live many lives, then it gives you courage. And it gives you tremendous power and tremendous courage and tremendous confidence. And it was an attempt to undermine that courage and that confidence, right? That it was weeded out, rigorously weeded out.
Rigorously. And it really does. How do we rebirth that idea into the world? What Our Lady talks about is the long story of our soul. It is not a short story that has one single birth, one single death. There's no way mercy and justice happen within a single life. We don't even understand love in a single life or anything. Only when we can step back
Right.
and see the vast possibilities of
Mm.
life and death.
Mm.
Then we get sobriety from empire.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves in the land of miracles and magic.
Right. Well, for some reason, we don't seem to be able to read the comments. I'm not sure why that is, but
I don't know. Maybe there are no. I don't think there are any comments today, Clark.
hmm.
So we're just going to keep going for a few more
All
minutes,
right.
and then we will. I wanted to think about this idea, though, that Jesus is offering us. If what he's offering us is a resurrection in the future, if we're good, it becomes a vehicle of control.
Hmm.
If what Jesus is offering every being is the reality existent in all of nature around us, that nothing dies, that something is born, that it's the same law as the conservation of matter. Nothing goes anywhere.
Hmm.
Your soul doesn't go anywhere. This is heaven. This is hell. What would it be like to create a world we longed to be reborn into?
I'm always struck. There are certain people who will tell me that, well, when this life is over, I just really want to be done. I don't want to be born again. I don't want to come back. Right. And, it's like love, I think, and all the great love poetry. If you read Shakespeare, if you read, the great Greek and Roman poets, this is a continuous theme, that the idea that love doesn't die. And it's love. And Our Lady has been very clear about this, that draws us back over and over and over again. And we see that love, in nature. I read a haiku today about the thunder and lily pads longing for one another, right? The idea that the thunder rumbles and the lily pad shakes on the surface of the water, and these two things seem to resonate with one another. And all of nature is playing with the rest of nature. Everything is in love with everything. Everything constantly desires to return and to be reborn and to green the earth.
And what has crushed the life force within people?
Hmm.
Because a lot in our culture is designed to crush the life force in people, the joy.
Hmm.
And this is what Our Lady is trying to help us recover. This is the resurrection she is trying to help us do. It's the resurrection of that seed in our heart that she has planted there.
Hmm.
How do we nurture that seed?
Yeah.
How do we let the green wick of life begin to rise up and grow within us so that our lives resurrect within themselves?
Hmm.
And we resurrect joy and the possibility for joy, because then we become indestructible. And then empires fall. Then the wrong towers fall, and the right towers are built within us.
Hmm.
And that's really the invitation here with the resurrection. Can we resurrect the world of magic and miracles?
Yeah.
Can we resurrect a green world again?
And I'm going to anticipate a question. I'm not sure the chat function doesn't seem to be working. I'm sure that people are out there trying to get through. I apologize for that for whatever reason. But I'm going to anticipate a question that I'm pretty sure that some people have. And that is, well, what about cultures where reincarnation and belief in reincarnation has always been the rule? Why are they in the same kind of trouble that the Western world is in? And I think that it's as simple as uh, all human beings, even those cultures that believe in reincarnation, haven't for a very, very long time believed in reincarnation ecologically. In other words,
Yeah.
there has been a faith-based or religion-based or dogma, doctrinal-based, and rebirths are in Buddhism and in Hinduism are dependent on merit, and there's this whole hierarchical, the patriarchy
Karmic
basically,
fundamentalism is what I
yeah,
call
the
it.
patriarchy basically hijacked the doctrine of reincarnation in Buddhism and in Hinduism, and turned it into an endless kind of gamesmanship where certain people were on top because they had good karma and had accumulated good merit from past lives. Certain people were on the bottom, so it was used to hold people in place to oppress
If you were
people.
a slave, it was
That's
because you
right.
deserved to be a
Yeah.
slave. And that's what I call karmic
So it's a
fundamentalism.
linear notion of reincarnation as opposed to a circular notion of reincarnation, which is that all things are constantly
Dying and being
dying, being
reborn.
reborn.
And dying for each other,
Yeah.
which is the
And
ecological
probably
equation.
the original teachings of these religions probably were ecological. I mean, one of the Buddhist sayings that we can definitely attribute to him, one of the earliest sayings was, throughout endless eons, all beings have been my mother. All beings have been my father, right? That's the ecological understanding, a circular understanding reincarnation,
And
and a very sane understanding.
this is the world we are invited into.
Mm,
We move our joy through birth, we move our joy through death,
mm,
and we rebirth ourselves in a different world, in a world outside of empire,
mm.
in a world back in the garden. How do we get back to the garden? It's like that Joni Mitchell song, or about Woodstock, and she is Our Lady of Woodstock. How do we get back to the garden?
Yeah,
We get back to the garden by knowing that this planet is our home,
yeah.
and we're not going anywhere.
I mean, that's where the novena of Our Lady of Woodstock, for those of you who prayed it this past June 8th through June 16th, that's where it ends. She says, how can I tell you of the world to come when it lies within you and lies all around you,
All around us.
even now, it's
I mean,
here.
one of the things, and I'll end, we talk a lot about paleo history, and I think it's fascinating to me that in a lot of indigenous cultures, there's not a word for like great grandparent. Great grandparent is child. So you're just, so I ask our modern viewership, how many of you want to be reborn into the same families?
Yeah,
What does it say about our understanding of family if that feels like a crazy question?
yeah,
How many of us want to be reborn into the same towns and land and communities? If we
yeah,
don't, what does that say about our relationship to town and land and community?
yeah,
What would it look like to give birth to a love to be reborn
mm,
endlessly
yeah,
on this very
yeah.
planet?
I mean, I'm very struck by the fact that a lot of people, when you talk to people like our age or older, about global warming and about species extinction and all the many converging catastrophes and potentially apocalyptic events of the 21st century, they say, well, I'll be gone. I won't live to see it, right? As if it's like not my problem. And I want to say, well, where do you think you go if not here, right? Where do you think you go? Do you think that's it? You cease to exist? The nature tells us just the opposite. Nature tells us that everything returns, eternal return,
Cycle.
right? So this is our
Constant
world. This is the
cycles.
world we're going to be reborn into.
And this is the moment in the resurrection that we enter the glorious mysteries and we enter a totally reborn world, a
Yeah,
reborn reality of the world.
yeah,
And this has been the work of the mysteries religion. This is the initiation.
yeah,
If we've done the work of moving through the first 10 mysteries, this is where we arrive.
yeah.
Where
That's
there are
right.
miracles in the world.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think that's it. Thank you all very
Thank you
much.
very much.
I
Thank
hope there
you.
was somebody on. I don't know if anyone
No,
was.
there are plenty of people up here. See, there.
Oh, well,
So I think the chat function is disabled or not
we will come
functioning
online and
fully.
answer questions. Okay.
All
Love you all
right.
so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye, everybody.